Welcome, everyone. Again, my name is Erin Connolly, and this is my colleague, Maura. Today, Maura and I are going to help you launch into math learning through evidence-based literacy practices. So I know a lot of you have your videos off, but I would love if you could just show hands either through your little hand emoji, or if you've got your video on, wave at me. Raise your hand if you've seen Scarborough's rope or heard of Scarborough's rope before. So like I said, okay, I see a couple of hand emojis, a raised hand. Thanks, Hannah. Awesome. Adam, I see your thumbs up. Okay. Okay, and I get a thumbs down from Kelly. I see it. Okay, well, great. You're going to see Scarborough's rope today. What we do know in the literacy world about Scarborough's rope is that it illustrates the components needed to become a skilled reader and how all those components weave together. So the top rope is language comprehension, and that's where our focus is going to be today as we launch into different math concepts. So you should see on my shared screen an illustration of Scarborough's rope. You see language comprehension on the top, word recognition on the bottom, and then that link to the readingleague.org where that Scarborough's rope image comes from. So using those strands as a guide, we're going to explore the use of vocabulary knowledge and background knowledge building specifically through literature to support math learning. So before we dive into that, though, we are going to quickly give a little bit more of an introduction of ourselves. So Maura, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Maura Brueggmann, and I've been teaching here at Whiteside a long time. I've taught about my first decade was in 8th grade science, and then I switched down to elementary and spent time doing 4th grade math for quite some time. And now I've been our lead math lab teacher at our school, and that's in kindergarten through 4th grade. So I see small groups of kids each day for about 45 minutes each group.
And I am currently the MTSS district coordinator on the academic side for Whiteside District 115. So I oversee our program for reading and math interventions for K through 8. And I'm also an IMSC OG Comprehensive Level 4 trainer and our Whiteside District trainer. So that is in regards to literacy instruction. And that I just finished up within this past year. So that's what we do. Before I took on this role, I spent 9 years in first grade. So a little bit about us. Okay. So like I said, we're going to start with background knowledge and vocabulary knowledge. Background knowledge is one strand that weaves into language comprehension section of that rope. And you can see that little image on the side there, a closer view of that language comprehension and what it includes. So I put a little quote here from Reading Rockets that I'm just going to share with you. And it tells us that kids naturally have limited knowledge about the world because they have fewer experiences to draw on and make connections to as they learn. Without more background knowledge, the information that one already knows about a particular topic, kids start out with a smaller capacity to learn. So I want you to think about that quote for a second and ask yourself, how do you think background knowledge can help in math instruction? So think about that for a second. And as you get some ideas, drop some of those in the chat. Or if you'd like to share them out loud with us, put up that hand emoji and I'll let you know that I see you and you can shout that out. So the question is, how do you think background knowledge can help in math instruction? You can drop it in the chat if you don't want to share it out with us.
Don't be shy.
Yeah, don't be shy. Help make connections for students. You got connections to prior learning, support new or extended learning, build on their skills in a logical sequence. Awesome.
Absolutely.
Foundational skills are so important. That background knowledge is essential across all subjects. You've got it in all content areas. We need that background knowledge, not just in those literacy-based subjects, but math as well. We need that conceptual knowledge. Understanding directions, understanding what they're supposed to do. Absolutely. They need that as well.
And I was going to say, every math teacher's worst nightmare, word problems, right? Just having that background knowledge to understand what they're asking in the problem with the vocabulary that's used.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Engage students with their passions outside of the classroom. Yeah. How can we make them connect within the classroom from knowing about their background experiences? So through experience in the classroom with literature and activities, we're going to build on our students' background knowledge, and that's going to then increase that capacity to learn in so many different ways, as you all just illustrated. So giving our students that background knowledge is going to provide them with some math experiences and language that they can really anchor to throughout math units of instruction, throughout an entire unit. You're going to hear me and Maura say that a lot, something for them to anchor into, to keep holding on to as they go through math concepts in full units. So our next strand that we're going to focus in and hone in on is the vocabulary knowledge strand of Scarborough's rope. So direct instruction helps our students learn those difficult words that represent complex concepts that are not part of their everyday experiences. So keeping that in mind, and this kind of falls right in line with background knowledge, but how do you think vocabulary knowledge can help in math instruction? Drop that in the chat, raise an emoji hand if you have some ideas. So specifically vocabulary knowledge. So breadth and depth of those vocabulary words. How can giving them more depth, more words that they understand in their word banks, how can that help your math instruction? Drop some ideas in the chat. We use those words to make sense of what we see and what we're thinking. Absolutely. Yep. Thanks, Adam. What else? There's some other ideas in there, maybe one or two more if you got them. Engage in, yeah, it allows them to engage in math discourse with their peers. Absolutely. And context of the problem. Yes. Thanks, Kelly. Thanks, Craig. We use words to share their reason. Yep. Thanks, Kelly. Absolutely. Those are great ways that vocabulary knowledge can help our math instruction. And it does help us to avoid any misconceptions, Hannah. Absolutely. So introducing our students to math vocabulary, Adam, they have common words we can all say and know what they mean. And we talk about that as we're going to go through some of our examples here today too. Awesome. Thank you. So when we introduce them to that math vocab before jumping into math instruction, that gives them an understanding of the concepts they're about to learn. And that prior exposure to those vocabulary terms, again, gives them an anchor for their learning in math. Okay. So keeping that language comprehension, I've got that image there again, that language comprehension section of Scarborough's rope in mind, we're going to look at launching into math learning through these 4 texts that you see listed on your screen. So the first one is Fish Eyes by Lois Ehlert. Right there. The second one, this is how we are, is How Big is a Foot by Rolf Miller. Our third selection is The Doorbell Rang by Pat Hutchins. And our fourth selection is Holy Cow by Taryn Souders. Okay, so those are our 4 selections we're going to take a look at as we go through using that literature to jump into our math concepts.
And we just came up, I mean, there were so many books that when we started to look through our classroom libraries, books we already use in instruction, books that we have seen online are like, oh, this one would be great. Just picking the books was easy. So if you ever interested, there's so many selections that you could use for any topic you want. You Google it, it's going to come up with a book. If you need an idea, send Erin or I a message, and we can help you out.
And we can share too. We're only going through 4 selections here, covering some different math concepts. We have a whole tub of books to our site here. We can throw up show some of those at the end too, just to share with you some other ones you can use to help you launch into math through literacy. So our first text we're going to look at is called Fish Eyes. The suggested grade level from us is kindergarten and 1st grade. And on the left side of this slide, you see some math concepts and vocabulary that we recommend you use to kind of go through and give experiences with before you jump into this book. And that is talking to your students about what a number is, and then math vocabulary like more, add, plus, addend, sum, and equal. It's important to keep in mind that the words that we're pulling out for you to really dig deeper into and give your students experience with, they're not necessarily all directly in the text that you're going to be reading. Some of them are, but some of them are just words and concepts that your kids need to have experience with before you jump into any of those math activities that go with the unit you're about to jump into. So with an introduction for fish eyes, you might start out by discussing numbers, asking your students, what are numbers? Numbers are symbols. They represent how much of something you have. What does more mean? More is a greater quantity.
And let's talk about that. So we have like our little vocabulary cards that we use. They don't have to be fancy like this. You can write it on a note card like this, like I do a lot of times. And when we talk about life experiences and background knowledge, when we say more, we automatically know like which number is more, 4 or 10. And so many times those kindergartners, they're still like, they don't understand. They don't understand what I mean by more.
Because it's abstract.
Right.
Yeah,
totally.
right.
And so we talk about giving them experiences with this. So like, let's just say, for example, you have the word more. We're getting ready to read this book, Fish Eyes, and we're going to be using some goldfish crackers in this book. So for an experience with that is you could go around the room and hand the kids different amounts of goldfish crackers. And then you could have them count how many, talk about a number that it represents the quantity or the amount that they have, and then pull two kids up next to each other. And, Erin and I were talking about this. We should have modeled it.
Yeah, we should.
But, you could say, she has, 5 and I have 4. And we say, let's eat them one at a time until I'm out and she still has one left. She has more. So just providing these little experiences that can really mean a lot to the kids as you go through.
That they can anchor into and think about as they're going through their math concept. So just some other concepts and vocabulary to introduce and kind of play with, act out. You can do different ways for them to have exposures to these words and concepts. The word add, what does it mean? The plus symbol, equal symbol. What does equal mean? Add and sum is the same as part, whole, addend, sum. Explore that, like Maura said, with objects such as goldfish to connect to the story. There are some great, if your district has access to vocabulary, I believe it does require a subscription for most of their videos. There's a great video called Comparing Numbers if it's appropriate for your students. You could also bring that into play before you jump into the book. And then you would go in, read Fish Eyes with your students, and use that literature experience as a concept anchor throughout the unit. So you would go through for Fish Eyes, go through those vocabulary words, give them experiences with them, play around with what they mean, show them, model them, act it out. And then we go in to reading our text.
All right. So for Fish Eyes, this is a book that I would read before teaching. And I'm going to talk to you. Sometimes I read the book before, sometimes after, sometimes during. So I kind of tried to pick an example of each. So I would read this first. Fish Eyes is a book that basically is about adding 1 each time. So I'm just going to give you a selection of just a couple little pages here. So 2 jumping fish plus me makes 3. And so each page they'll be adding on. The next page, 3 smiling fish plus me makes 4. And the book goes on and on like that. Again, a word like plus, knowing that plus means you're adding 1. It's getting bigger. It is more. And just being able to use symbols that we're going to talk about too. One of my biggest frustrations as a math teacher is so many kids just don't feel like math vocabulary is important. Like, even though usually on their tests in their homerooms, there's a vocabulary part to the test. Yes. They don't make that same connection that they do in reading when they are going to have their reading vocabulary words. They're like, math is math, math is numbers. Well, we need to tell them that, we need vocabulary to make sense of what we are doing when we're writing number sentences and equations. Oftentimes, like Erin said, we put actions with our words. One of the very first actions that kindergartners learn is that part, whole. From part, whole, we just change the words to add and sum. And we keep doing that with the first graders and so on. And honestly, I still have to do it with the older kids too. So it is a good review always. So anyway, so that's just an introduction. You would read the book, and then we're going to go into our activity. And for this activity, we're going to turn it over to the hover cam for a second, but I like to use these dry erase mats for everything so I don't have to laminate a bunch of stuff or make a bunch of copies. So we're going to start out after we read the book with a little, I can use it, there we go, placemat with an activity on it. And by the way, before I forget to tell you this, every worksheet you see, every activity I'm talking about, everything is linked at the end in the resources. It's all Google formatted. So this worksheet, everything I'm talking about will all be there for you at the end of this, if you wanted to use it. So when we do this activity, we're going to start, and in the sheet, in the resources, I do have some orange fish and blue fish that you could print off and do paper fish, and that would work. But Erin and I—
Food is more fun, for sure.
Food is fun. So we've got our goldfish crackers we're going to use and our Swedish fish.
Love those Swedish fish.
We do. And when we use these with our kids, they get way more excited about anything because now we have food. So I have them flip a digit card, could have them roll a dice, whatever. Let's say the number's 4. So I'll say, put 4 goldfish on your mat. They'll put the 4. We'll talk about 4 being a number, shows the quantity or the amount that we build. And then I'm going to have them start recording as well. So they're going to write their numeral down, 4 goldfish. And remember, we're adding 1 every time. And 1 Swedish fish, like so, okay? And one of the things that we want them to start doing, of course, depending on, let's say if this is kindergarten, they're going to count 1 to 1. They're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you're going to see 5. However, let's say we're doing this with first grade as a review, add on 1. We want them to be able to say 4, 5. So just using this to count on 1 instead of having to count each number, you can throw whatever math concept in you want into these books. So then I would have them record their number sentence. We would talk about the parts, part, whole. And then I would say, can you read this number sentence? Because it's so important that they can read the number sentence as it goes along. I have a lot of kids who, instead of plus, will say minus. And they still will say 5, 4 minus 1 equals 5. Well, it doesn't, even though the plus is written there. So just getting them familiar with this math vocabulary as well. So have them read the number sentence. And after we do our part, whole, add and sum, we're going to put in the parts. 4 plus 1 equals 5. And it just kind of builds upon each other.
So yeah, absolutely.
That's fish eyes.
Okay. That was fish eyes. Okay. So we're going to lead into our—
Any questions?
Any questions? Yes, Adam, Swedish fish, the best.
They're the best.
Yes. Okay. So our next one we're going to lead into, and if there are any, as we're going through this, if you have any questions or you want to throw a comment out there, please don't hesitate to throw up your hand emoji or drop it in the chat. Kelly is monitoring the chat for us. So please just know that that's an option if you have questions that you want to ask as we're going through this as well. So our next text selection is How Big is a Foot by Rolf Miller. And our suggested grade level for this one is grade levels 2 and 3. With this one, some of the concepts of vocabulary you're going to take a look at, words like measure, length, width, standard, and then foot as a unit of measurement. one thing to note here is you are going to go through this whole background knowledge vocabulary experience and then do the math activity first before reading the text selection. So you would give your students first experience and activities with discussing and exploring the meanings of these concepts like measure and measurement, length, that means how long, width, how wide, standard, normal, and then foot, a standard unit of distance for measuring. There's also a great Brain Pop Junior video. Again, if your district has a subscription to that, they do also have some good free options available. But I'm not sure if inches and feet is one of those free ones, but inches and feet on Brain Pop Junior. There's also regular Brain Pop for those older students that you can go through and watch as well. They also have some great vocabulary activities in Brain Pop and vocabulary that you can use for that vocabulary introduction and that background experience. So again, go through these concepts and these vocabulary words, give them some exposure to them, model them, give them experiences with them. You can also bring in those tried and true graphic organizers like a word web and work on one of those together for some of these concept words.
We talked about Erin was talking about introducing all these words. The one I'm going to hold off on, I'm going to tell you not to do is don't say anything quite about foot yet. Talk about length, talk about width, talk about height. Just use objects in your classroom. Just say, I'm sure you guys have a table, their desk, how long, and don't say you don't have to measure it with a ruler. Just start pointing out long versus wide versus height, other things we measure, even weight, bring any types of measurements into this. You don't have to go out and buy anything to show for examples. Just kind of start using this stuff in your classroom and talking about it. Just use what's around you.
Yeah, absolutely. So Maura is going to jump into going through the math activity. But after that activity, you'd read that how big is a foot? And again, this literature experience, keep rooting yourself in this as you go through those math concepts in your math unit. So we'll move on. One thing that I forgot to point out, and you probably noticed since you're staring at them, our slides for the math activity page, we've got pictures of it live real in action in Mrs. Brueggmann's classroom. So those are some of the students that she does those lessons with. So I'll let you take over the math activity.
And it's good to kind of look at the pictures on here while I'm talking about this activity. It'll make a little bit more sense. So not only do you have some math, you have literature, but you also have some history in this book. And I like to get in as many different subjects as possible, because we are so limited on our teaching time. So in this story, How Big is a Foot, it is the background story of how we came up to have the foot as the standard unit of measurement that we use today. And the reason I don't talk about it is because before we even read the book, I tell the kids that I need them to make a bed for me that is 6 feet long by 3 feet wide. And sometimes depending on the day, I make up a story. I might be making bunk beds for my daughters. I might be, who knows, making triple bunk beds for, we have a set of triplets here at Whiteside. You never know. I just make stuff up. So anyway, but I tell them this is what I need. And I tell them it is extremely important. And as soon as I tell them that, I divide them into groups. And you can decide if you want your groups to be partners. This is a tough one to do as partners because it requires, it's kind of big. So I like to do groups of 3 or 4. I rarely like to do groups more than 4 because I just think it's easy to hide in a group of 5. Sometimes easy to hide in a group of 3, but really easy to hide in a group of 5. And all I provide them with is I tell them, so to make the template for their bed, then I have some butcher paper and some tape. If you have bulletin board paper at your school, those big rolls of bulletin board paper, those are fabulous, but I know those are kind of expensive and you might not want to waste them. Also, wrapping paper, like old wrapping paper. So when wrapping paper goes real cheap after Christmas, wrapping paper is also, if you don't have butcher paper, wrapping paper is a really good idea too. So we take this, I just say, okay, 6 feet by 3 feet. We have to decide whose foot in each group we're going to measure. So you can do this numerous ways. 2 ways would be, one, have them play rock, paper, scissors, because they love that, to see who the winner is going to be of their group to have their foot traced. Or you could divide them into groups, and you could say you randomly selected a person's foot to be traced, where it may be not so random, because you know that maybe you have a kiddo in your class with a really little foot, and then you know you got this really big tall kid. It's really fun if you can get different sized feet in there. So I kind of like to do it that way. And then they, as you can see in the picture in the top part, they are tracing each other's foot. So when they're done, they might have a foot and a foot, but they're never seeing each other's foot. They're just tracing it. And then they're working really, really hard to make this bed. And they get the beds made. It takes longer than you think it's going to take. I'm going to tell you right there. And once the bed is made, you pull everybody back together. They still have their beds, and you are just so excited that you finally have these beds and that you can get this made. And let's bring the beds together. And then, as you can see in the picture on the slide, the beds don't match. They don't match. And you can decide how far you want to take this. Usually I am like, who made the mistake? One of these is not right. And then they're going to be like, no, it's right. And I'm like, oh, it can't be right. And I'm like, prove it. And they take their foot and they measure it and they show me it's 6 by 3. And I say to the other group, well, you must be wrong then. And they're like, we're not wrong. And they take their foot and they measure it and they show me it's 6 by 3. And then I'm like holding the feet up the whole time I do that. And I'm like, what could be the problem? And then it depends on your class. Different things could happen.
Very much so.
Somebody might figure out what we want them to figure out, and that is that these feet are 2 different sizes. So we're not measuring with something that's standard, with something that's the same. Or you could have what I had one time, and they all just fought with each other until like, you're wrong.
They were all wrong.
Okay, until we finally kind of had to lead them to this. And so that class in particular, I said, well, maybe if we read this book, we can decide why these beds aren't matching and what the problem is. And throughout the book, you learn that the king, really in history, the king wanted to make a bed for his wife, the queen, and he measured to see how long it should, or how big the bed should be with her crown on, because she likes to wear it to bed. That's her favorite part. And then they go ahead and give it to this apprentice who builds the bed. The bed is the wrong size. So the book goes on about, how they throw the apprentice in jail and blah, blah, blah. And he has this moment of clarity that says, wait, my feet are not the same size as the king, because this apprentice is really tiny. And luckily he figures it out. They make a mold of the king's foot in marble. And here we have what we call a foot today. And so depending on how long your math class is, if you only have like a 45-minute block, you'll never get this second part in a day. But if you have an hour-long math block, you could. At the end, after we talk about all this, I introduce the ruler, talk about why it's called a foot, and then we remeasure the bed using 6 feet by 3 feet, and we use a ruler to do all of our measurements. And then we come back together and we talk about the beds again, and that they're the same, that they are the same, or should be, if they did it right, the same. And the kids, they love it. It's almost like an aha moment for them, which is exactly what we're going for.
And something they can really anchor in and come back to as you go through your math unit on measurement and feet and inches and bringing all of that together. So before we move,
somebody put a lot of wrapping paper actually have the grid lines on it too. Great point. Awesome.
Yes. So before we flip on to the next literature selection, if you have any comments, questions you want to throw in the chat or raise your hand to unmute and share with us, please do. I am going to flip to the next slide, but please know that you can do that at any time. We are looking at that chat if you have questions about it. I'll give just a second if anybody has anything they want to throw out there. Okay. We have to get our necessary equipment for our next one. We always bring in food.
We love food.
Okay. All right. So our next text selection is called The Doorbell Rang by Pat Hutchins. And this suggested grade level is grade levels 3 and 4. The math concepts and become, yes, kids of all ages, including this kid right here. So math concepts and vocabulary, we're going to look at share, divide, equal, divisor, dividend, quotient. Again, as a reminder, not all of this language is in the actual text itself, but it will be in your discussion and where you're heading with your math concepts that you're going to be diving into. So here you're going to discuss, explore, model, maybe bring in some word webs, and work with words like share, portioning out, divide, equal parts, equal, same, again, quotient, dividend, divisor, to provide more background and vocab knowledge for your upcoming unit. After you go through that experience with those vocabulary words and background concepts, then you're going to read your book, The Doorbell Rang, and you'll use that literature to anchor into, and then you'll lead into your math activity.
And we didn't bring this food with us, but like as part of the anchor activity, like we, even passing out a deck of cards as you're dividing, like we have a certain amount in the deck and we're passing them one at a time to each other. We kind of talk about what it is to share and how we can share things, and something as simple as a deck of cards and doing divvying out the deck of cards to everybody. It's just a fast, easy way to show how, equally sharing, having to have the same amounts of things.
Yes, Adam, you're right. They're also read aloud recorded YouTube for those books if you want to listen to that story.
Yes, yeah. And all of them are linked in the resources. And when you pull up the lesson plan, the book will be in there and the YouTube link to the story will be in there for you also. Yeah.
Thanks for putting that out there, Adam. I appreciate it. Okay, so the doorbell rang. Clearly, we're going to be working on dividing into equal groups. So we're going to lead into that math activity. Yeah. Do you want this?
Well, I want to point out, so the first book we read before we did the activity. Okay. The second book, the How Big is a Foot, we read after we did an opening activity. And this book is an example of a book that you would read while you are doing the activity. So using the YouTube version of this book is actually my favorite way to read it, because then I have the ability, it's up on the big screen, we can pause it, we can talk, and we can do that. And so for this book, it's all about grandma making those cookies. Thanksgiving time. I can already taste the cookies now.
Cookies.
And I would love to make cookies for my entire class, but I don't have time. And we're not even allowed to make things anyway, right? So everything has to be store-bought. So anyway, you could get something like Chips Ahoy Minis, which are always delicious. And a lot of them come in a bag, so that wouldn't be too bad. Or you can do what I almost always do. Cookie Crisp cereal, right?
A childhood favorite.
I realize as an adult, these actually don't taste very good. But the kids don't care because they're eating something, right? So I like to use Cookie Crisp cereal. So that's the first thing with this book, is decide what kind of cookies you want to use. And if you want to do paper cookies, if you have an allergy in your class or whatever, that's totally fine too. So one, decide what kind of cookies you want to use. And two, decide how you want this activity to run for your class. Do you want this activity to be done as an individual, where they are, as they're working through the book, I have a worksheet I'm going to show you. They're going to be filling in the worksheet and they're going to be counting their own cookie crisps and doing all of that. That's a possibility. Or do you want this to be done in partners, if you want to pair kids up and do it? Or do you want to make like groups of 3? So it's really up to you and knowing your class and where you want this to go. Because you could do this as individuals, pairs, or groups. It is really up to you. So, all right.
Awesome.
All right.
You want this
We'll talk about it. Yeah.
Okay.
So this book is an oldie but a goodie. I just love it. So in this book, they're making actually, Mom is making the recipe for grandma's cookies because they're the best. And the 2 kids, her 2 children, she gives it to them and says, hey, you get to share these cookies. And they're like, sweet. 6 cookies each, you know? And then more and more people keep coming to the door. And every time people come to the door, they have to share with more kids. So on the worksheet, it has who's sharing the cookies. Now, this is, if you want a worksheet, I made this, that you can use it. There have been times where I've done this activity and we just take out a whiteboard and we just do it right on a whiteboard. It doesn't have to be like this. Like, you guys can decide how to run it. But basically, so when it's Victoria and Sam, the 12 cookies are divided among 2 people, so they get 6 each. And then some more friends come to the door. Now the 12 cookies are being divided among 4 people. And then all of a sudden, instead of 6 cookies each, they're only getting 3. You know, it's a scam, right? So and now 2 more people come to the door. There's 6 people having to share these cookies. Now they're only getting 2. Well, I always think when teaching division for the first time or even reviewing division, one of the hardest things to teach the kids is as the divisor gets bigger, the quotient gets smaller. They just have such a hard time with that. And that leads into fractions too. Yeah, somebody said having more friends has its drawbacks. Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. So as they work in through this book, that's the main point I like to get across, is that point about, as the more people you share with, the less cookies you're each going to get. And you work in that math vocabulary to that with divisor and dividend and quotient. We talk about using actions for words. I actually also like to use sound effects for my words. Because whenever we talk about dividend for the first time, I always tell them the dividend, it's the bigger number. That's how you can recognize it. So even to this day, I'll have 4th graders come back to me and they will say, dividend, because that's dividend's big and strong, and
they won't forget it.
And then when we say divisor, we have to say it in like a Mickey Mouse voice. Divisor.
And these are things that you can, in your literature, in your vocabulary and background knowledge experiences with them, bring those motions in. So then they've got them before you jump into that text.
Right. So sometimes if they can't think of what the vocabulary word is, I mean, if I just go like this, or if I just go like this, they know, oh, yes, the big one, the small one. I know which one it is now. So anyway, I just want to throw that one in too. And then again, at the bottom of the worksheet, it actually has them filling in, the vocabulary words as well, just to kind of keep reinforcing some of the math vocabulary that is working into all of this.
Okay. Awesome. All right. Okay, so our next text selection is Holy Cow, Fractions Are Fun by Taryn Souders. And the suggested grade level here is 3rd, 4th, or 5th. So some of the vocabulary and concepts you're going to take a look at: fraction, whole. In the text, they will have exposure to half, thirds, fourths, fifths, and sixths. There's a couple different vocabulary video options dealing with fractions. There's one for 1st through 4th grade. You see that in the bottom right corner of that slide, and it's just called fractions. And then there's one geared more towards those 3rd through 5th grade students, and it's called Why Do We Need Fractions? So that's something you could start out the whole lesson with one of those vocabulary videos. Again, there's some really great vocabulary activities and words connected to those videos that you can bring in some of those as well. After that, go in and discuss and explore, model the meanings of fraction, whole, half, thirds, fourths, fifths, sixths. Bring in those big words, numerator, denominator, for that unit concept knowledge. Again, that you won't see those in the literature itself. But do some modeling, acting out, demoing with those vocabulary words so they have that background experience to connect to as well. After you go through all of that, then you're going to go in, read that Holy Cow text, and use that to anchor throughout your unit. Then you'll go into your math activity.
Correct. Okay. There's a couple of activities I like to do when we anchor them, just to show the kids, to give them some experience with them. So you could use your class as a whole. When we start talking about a whole, our whole class, And that could be 20 kids, 25 kids, whatever. And then you could start saying, well, how many students in our class are wearing tennis shoes? And we could say, oh, 15 out of 20, 15 over 20. Start talking about numerator and denominator. Okay, let's go back to our whole class. How many people in our class have brown eyes? And then you can start doing those types of things. It's giving them an experience. They're moving around the room. They're thinking of themselves as being part of the class. They know they're part of a class. So now they're part of a whole. So that's one really quick, easy way to do it. The other way, and I did not bring it up here from my classroom, I should have, was using the Hershey's fraction book and just kind of having the Hershey bars with you in class and being able to, there's nothing more perfect than a Hershey bar, to split into many parts. Unless you just want to do force, then you can eat Kit Kats. I like that too.
Yeah.
So anyway, those are, again, another way to bring food into it, which we love, and the kids will remember that. Also, when we introduce the vocabulary words, will be my first introduction to some fraction strips. Like we have our whole, and then we'll talk about, half, being able to fold it in half. Just anything that you can do to bring those types of experiences into the kids, anything to put it in their brains and kind of lock it in there, because fractions can be hard. It can be confusing. Numerator, denominator. I mean, these big words, they're like, what are you expecting me to know? But so much of their life is fractions, are pieces of a whole, so start bringing in those examples of life, like pizza and just anything. Food is always good, but just again, even just using things with your class where they're writing parts of a whole.
You want this up?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, please.
Okay. Got it.
Oh, you know what? Can they still see me?
Yes, they can. They can still see you.
Okay. So, holy cow, fractions are fun. How many of your students think fractions are fun? We want all of them to. That's why we're doing this. Okay. So this book is great. I'm just going to read you like a page. And so this is about midway through the book. Let me see if they can see it now. Okay. One whole cow balanced on a peg got a little klutzy and hurt one leg. And they'll look at the picture and then they'll say, what fraction of the legs is hurt? What fraction of the legs is not hurt? And you can start talking about one out of 4 legs are hurt, 1/4. Talk about numerator, talk about denominator, and then how many are not hurt. You could say 3 out of 4 are not hurt, and talk about how to say those words like 3/4. And so during the book, you can stop, talk, have conversations, go back and mention numerator and denominator, go back and talk about how to say those specific fractions, all while you're going through the book. And this cow's pretty funny. He does a lot of funny stuff. So I think your kids will like it. So that's the activity. And I do this first. And then we go into one of my favorite activities, and some of you may already do it. I know that, just like all these activities, it's out there. The first time I saw this activity was on the K-5 mathematics. I do a lot of their stations and different things. I really like them. And this one is called My Fraction Bar Riddle. So I made a Google slide. I found with my class, it was easier for me to put like a Google slide presentation up on the screen to do this whole class. And so I'm going to pull that up so you can see the Google slide. And this is in the resources. It's there for you. So this Google slide presentation will be there for you to use with your class if you want to. So we talk a lot about fraction bars and dividing those bars into pieces, just like we do with any time we're drawing bar models, right? Fractions is a great place to show the different bar models. So I tell the kids that we're going to be making fraction bars today, but we're going to do it with riddles. And I make it like real serious, like put up your blockers, kids. I don't want anybody to see your stuff, you know what I mean? And then, blockers are going up, serious. So they put up their blockers because basically I don't want them to cheat, right? But it's like secret stuff. And so we put up the blockers, and this can be done 2 ways. Whole class, which is what I'm going to model for you now, or you can do this with a partner where they can share different things back and forth. So whole class, I would say, okay, friends. I start out by giving my kiddos, by the way, just a basket full of Unifix cubes. I decide what colors I want them to have, and I put those in there. And I just give them a basket. That's all I give them. And then I tell them, figure it out. So I say 3/6 of my fraction bar is red, 2/6 of my fraction bar is green, and 1/6 of my fraction bar is blue. And that's all I say. And so the first year I ever did this, I thought, well, this is going to be so easy. They're going to know, they're going to do it exactly the right way. I mean, this is simple, right? Well, I couldn't have been more wrong. I mean, what the hardest part of this lesson for me was letting them do it wrong, because, you know, like you, I'm sure, do in your classroom, we embrace mistakes. We know mistakes are how we learn. So you know, if we make a mistake, they're always like, all right, it's encouraged. It's great. What did we learn? All right, let's do it again. So I will have kids just build, you know, a tower of 10 blue. They just take all the Unifix blocks in the basket and they just put them in a tower.
Start building.
And I'm like, what? You know, like, and that's when I started seeing that first time when they did that, the little disconnect here. So then, you know, I may give them a hint, like, let's go back and look at that first bar, kids. A fraction bar might look something like this, where they're connected, you know, and then let it go on a little bit more. We might talk about, if 6 is the denominator, what is that telling us about what is that riddle telling us? What might our whole be? And I start, because I don't want them to like feel like failures, you know what I mean? But still, then it might not be right. So I will say to them, at the count of 3, if you want to, if I would say, if you're feeling brave today, you can hold up your fraction bar and show me. If you're not feeling brave today, no big deal. Keep it behind your blocker. You might feel brave on the next one. Keep it behind your blocker. I'll come by and take a look at it. And so at the count of 3, I always have one pre-made. 1, 2, 3. They hold up their fraction bar and we talk about what it means. 3/6 is red, 2/6 is green, and 1/6 is blue. And, you know, Adam, you mentioned the riddle context. Ever since I started calling this a game and a riddle, it's all, they want to do it, you know, because it's not like I'm telling them to do something. It's like they're trying to figure it out. Oh, we're playing a game. We're making riddles today. It has changed the way that this teaching, when I first start teaching the fractions goes. So it goes on. So on the Google presentation that you're getting, I put 3, I did 6, 8ths, and 10ths. And then I go into my favorite part, and this part works really good if you put them with partners. It also works good to do it whole class, and they can come up and share their riddle with the entire class. But they have to make their own riddle for this next one. So I usually pull like all the Unifix blocks out or give them some different colors. And I tell them that these are their parameters. They will, in the first one, I do tell them use red, green, and blue, because I want to keep it just like what we've been doing. Then I tell them their bar must have more than 6, but less than 12 blocks. Now that right there is the kicker, because this is when, especially with 4th grade, 3rd grade, you have to guide them a little bit more on this one. They always want to make it 6 or 12, but the directions say more than 6, which has to start either at 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and less than 12. So it can't be 12 either. And so sometimes we are teaching them to read carefully. You could tell them to make it easier. It could have 6 or more, or 12 or less. That'd probably be easier for them. But I like to challenge them sometimes, see if they're paying attention. Then after they write, they have to write their 3 fraction clues. I'm going to just hold this up here for a second. This is the sheet that's on the Google slide, and I'll put that back up here in a second. I don't even know if it was upside down. No, it's not. Okay, good. So they fill in their clues, and then they draw a fraction bar. So they have to do their best to try to make the divider lines. That's a hard thing for them to do.
You can put it up under there?
Yeah. Oh, that's perfect. Cool. So they then have to write their own riddles. then they have to color in their bar, and then they have to give their fraction riddle either to the class to see if they can solve it. And of course, when we give the riddles, we don't show the answer. They don't show their bars there. And they love this. They love being able to make their own riddles. They love being able to write them for friends. And they love having different options. There's another slide that comes after that that lets them choose how many colors they want to use and how what the denominator could be and different things like that. So they just really enjoy it.
Yeah.
They have a nice time with it. And so do I. It's actually a lot of fun.
Awesome. All right. Okay. So those were our 4 text selections for you. I am putting up these slides that show where some of our resources came from for everything that we just went through. And then we've got our vocabulary. Just as a reminder, we have those in, had some of those worked in there. Those math vocabulary and concept cards that we used, we had them in print, and then you saw them embedded in some of the slides. Those were created by Reagan Tunstall, and you can find those on Teachers Pay Teachers. The ones you saw in this presentation were from a K-2 bundle, but she also has a 3rd through 5th edition available as well. And I put a link to that, to those there if you're interested in that. It's just something we use, not something that we're saying you have to get these. Like Maura said, you can make them as basic as you want. All of those literature selections are available on Amazon if you wanted to find the actual text itself as well. Again, we referenced Brain Pop and Brain Pop Junior. Maura had mentioned the K-5 math teaching resources.
Love them.
Yep. And then these are links, and you're going to get the slides from this presentation, and these link directly to the lesson plans and resources for each of the books.
Should we show them one?
Yeah, go ahead and
All
pull
right,
one
so
up.
like if you click fish eyes,
Oh,
it's blocking.
there we go. Always allow.
It's going to have the lesson plan here for you. And then if you click at the fish eyes work mat, it's going to have the work mat there for you, which has all the different stuff. And if you want to do the orange, if you don't want to use food, you can use those. It will have,
You can actually, click the back.
It will have the link to the read aloud book on YouTube is on there.
You can click it.
So it'll take you right to the YouTube link. So I wanted to try to make this as user-friendly for you guys as possible. And so it's all there for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So hopefully this was helpful to you and you got some new ideas from us today. We are free to take some questions or comments.
And I was just going to I saw in the chat, Adam said, like, you can use vocabulary in many different ways to word those riddles. What absolutely fabulous.
And I think, is it Jamie, some books for 6th graders. We have a lot of elementary level, but I can definitely do some searching and see what I've got. I think I've got some.
Reach out. We'll reach out to some of our math.
Yeah, and see if we can find some of those for those 6th graders. A link for the resources. There will on that last slide, there are some links there for you, and you'll get those links. You'll get these slides shared with you when we're done.
Yeah, and they should, when they get shared with you, these are all in Google, and they should be set to like anyone can open them. And if for any reason you are not able to open one of these, just email me and I'll make sure I share it directly with you.
And you know what? We'll put our emails in the chat. I'm going to put my email and then Maura's.
Thank you, Erin.
Okay, so those are emails. If you want to email us, if you can't, if some of the links aren't working, please feel free to do that. I see one in the chat with the books. work for special needs children, or do they need to be modified? I think they absolutely would work for special needs children, and it's flexible. You can modify them according to the needs of your students.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
Just, you could definitely use the book as it is, and then whatever you need to change to adapt it to what your children need, you would just adapt it in that math lesson.
Right.
I think they're all adaptable.
And whatever vocabulary would be appropriate, pull that in for them. I mean, they may not be ready for, quotient and divisor and dividend. So the vocabulary and background experiences, that's all based on what your students would need and what's appropriate for them. Great question. Any other questions while we're hanging on here?
We're very thankful that you guys took this time right before Turkey Day here.
Yes.
And everybody is like,
we're ready for turkey.
Ready for break.
Clearly, we love food.
You signing on and spending time with us.
Yes, we do. We're very grateful you were all here. So thank you very much.
Again, on behalf of ICTM, thank you so much, Maura and Erin, for sharing your knowledge, sharing great ideas, and just sharing your positivity, your positive energy. I love the positive energy that you're giving all of us, and we need that. And so fantastic
job. We love what we do.
I know, and I love it. And I'm so thankful for you guys being willing to share today. And I did find out that Erin and Maura are going to be presenting this actually down at the Southern program in February, the ICTM Southern Conference.
Yep, live and in person.
They'll be live and in person. If you want more of this dynamic duo, you will be there.
It's real crazy live.
There'll be food.
Awesome, Adam. See you there. Absolutely.